Welcome to HVAC Full Blast, where industry insight leads to real results. Today, we're tackling a topic that hits home for professionals across the HVAC world: mental toughness. In this business, adversity is inevitable, whether it's market changes, supply chain headaches, or personal challenges. Join Mary Carter with Trane and Stephen Ross with Sandler as they share real stories and strategies on building resilience, bouncing back, and thriving through tough times, professionally and personally. Let's get started.
All right, welcome back to HVAC Full Blast. I'm Mary Carter,
I'm Stephen Ross.
and we're excited to have another deep dive conversation with you about what's been on our mind, what we're seeing, and this year more than others, I would say, and maybe not even this year, just in general, this industry, boy, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads. Seems like the puts and takes, any other dual metaphor that you want to put for it. They've been coming fast, and it's been challenging to navigate how each of those different inputs, can maybe net your year. And maybe specifically, I'm referring to refrigerant, but in the past, it's been different challenges with maybe the pandemic or global supply chain. And no matter what it is, it seems like there's always something, ready to come wreck your plans or mess up your strategy, so to speak. Have you been
Yeah.
seeing that, Stephen?
Yeah. I think it's, I have a pretty good perspective. I really like what I do for a living. And so I get to see maybe our industry, HVAC, from a big picture. But I also get some insight into some other industries and some other companies. And so while to some extent we might feel like, oh my gosh, our business is really unique, the seasonality of our industry, the supply chain issues, some of the issues we've had, if you step back and look, other industries maybe have slightly different problems or very different problems, but they have problems. And so,
True.
just a very frequent topic of conversation is, if I'm in sales, how do I handle adversity? How do I handle tough times? Sometimes those tough times are our own creation, like we've made life tough on ourselves. Sometimes it has nothing to do with us. And I think sometimes those are the harder ones to deal with, because we sit around and we go, none of this is my fault. And yet here I am, I'm having a tough time for whatever reason, and now I got to deal with it. So lots of adversity out there. Our industry certainly has its unique brand of adversity, but for sure it's a common theme in the sales world.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I think about the kind of person that I am and how I go get and what makes me motivated, right? And when I'm in control and I have, the whole supply chain moving the way that I want it to, I feel really good. And I know exactly when things go wrong, I know exactly where to look. And that's a very freeing feeling, especially someone sitting in maybe a sales seat. But when it's out of my control, it's very easy to just want to throw your hands up and say like, well, tough sledding, right? Like, and that's really all I can say. There's nothing more I can do. I am just myself, and here's a circumstance that's thrown at me. So often the buzzword around it would be mental toughness, right? How do you create, the mental toughness to withstand that storm or face that challenge? And that's what I want to dive in with you today. Mental toughness, it's not just a buzzword, it's an actual concept. What is it? How do you face it? And maybe just even some examples from like our own experience on what we're doing when we face mental toughness, because we definitely experience it too. And it's not like we were just placed into our careers and just all of a sudden never had any problems ever again. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the questions I hate in job interviews, at least when I was the being interviewed, they would always there's always some sort of question along the lines of, tell me about a time that you failed or you're screwed up, and what did you do next?
yeah.
And that's not a fun one to answer in a job interview. But here's the other side of that. Now I'm a little bit more advanced in my career. I'm not having entry level job interviews anymore. Now my conversations are, I'm talking with CEOs, I'm talking with VPs of sales. And one of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years is maybe a shift in hiring, meaning like, what is it like if you had to go hire somebody today? And I'm talking to a CEO, and I say top two or three traits of somebody that you're looking to hire today. What are you looking for? And the two things that really come back, which I think is a little bit of shift from maybe the past, but the ability to learn quickly is very near the top of the list. And we would say that in our industry, which is, we didn't have a whole lot of change for 20, 30, 40 years. We had a little bit of change. Now, man, the last, 5 years, lots of change, everything's coming at you fast. And so your ability to handle that inflow of information, learn quickly, move on. And then right hand in hand with that is resilience. I hear that a lot. I'm looking for salespeople that can get knocked down and get back up.
Yeah.
And not to quote Chumbawamba, but that's a top 3 trait now that I think hiring managers, maybe not, I don't know, depends on the organization. But when I talk to CEOs or VPs of sales, very frequently do they say resilience, got to be tough. It's a tough world out there. It's getting harder. And so the ability to get back up after you get knocked down, primary thing we're looking for in hiring. So it's, there you go. I mean, it's something that corporate America recognizes. Failure is inevitable. Can you get back up?
Full disclosure, I have a playlist on my phone, and whenever I'm going into meetings, I like to tap into that playlist. Without a doubt, it's got a few things on there that just kind of pump me up and give me that energy that I need to be customer facing, and Chumbawamba is definitely on it. So
nice. All
but
right.
it's true. I get back down, I get back up again, and resilience. Again, the buzzword around it. But what does it really mean, and how can you take something from it that really means something to you in your day? It's such a great point. I could not relate anymore, especially as we've gone through the last 5 years for sure. Lots of change, rapid right at you. So yeah, learning quickly, being able to learn and adapt and go into process really well and really fast, and then that resilience piece. So how does resiliency show up? What does that mean? Or do you have any examples where you have seen resiliency, really pay off?
Yeah. I introduce myself a lot of times as a mediocre sales guy because I really feel like the first 10 years of my career, I was maybe a little bit better than average, but I was pretty close to average. And so my first kind of introduction to Sandler training was I needed to get real good real quick because my wife was quitting her job and we were having another kid. And so going in and sitting down with a sales coach and having him ask me some questions, one of the lines of questioning that he asked is how much money are you making now and how much money do you need to make? And so this is 2006, 2007. I said, I'm making about 75,000 a year now. He's like, how much do you need to make? My wife was making 35 grand a year as a school teacher. So I was like, well, I mean, just to make that up, I got to get to about 110, And he says to me, so are you worth 110?
Ooh.
And I said, yes. And he goes, yeah, I don't think you think that. And
Ooh.
I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, well, how long have you been making 75 grand a year? And I said, well, for 5 straight years, I've been making about 75 grand a year. He goes, well, if you really felt like you were worth 110 at the end of the first year where you made 75 grand, but you felt like you were making 110, what would you have done? Probably buckled down, work harder, been a little frustrated. At the end of year 2, what would you have done? I'd have quit my job and gone somewhere else. Right. And so but just by that him questioning me, what he's pointing out is I was performing at the level that I believed I should perform at. And the biggest challenge is all of a sudden I want to make 110, but my mindset is I'm a $75,000 a year sales guy and I'm okay with that. And because if I wasn't okay with that, I would have made some big changes in the previous 5 years. And so now all of a sudden I need to make more money. But his point to me was you don't believe it, right?
Mm.
Like your belief system is what's holding you back. And so we had a pretty good conversation about that. What do you believe you're worth? Do you ever get into those? I don't know, married, like growing up, like I know your dad was a sales guy. Did he pound some mental toughness into you growing up?
I think I definitely saw him display mental toughness, working out of a home office. We got to really have a front row seat to his career, which it's kind of fun that the idea of working from home was not a new concept to me. So very interesting to really see that. But absolutely the battles that he would fight with marketing and sales and marketing are a synergy. And then he would have to take that to a two-step distribution model, very similar to how most manufacturers work in the HVAC world. And it was, not always a yes, right? And you get the no's, and what does that mean? And, the highs are high, the lows are low, but what do you do in the lows? You got to keep getting better. And I think that's a really interesting reflection that, your owner was able to have with you in that sense. And I can see where that would feel harsh, right? I mean, that feels like pretty vicious feedback to kind of say, like, are you worth it? And personally, I think a young Mary would have been like, probably not. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I should just get online right now and start looking for another job. And I could definitely see a scenario in which I would do that, just that. What I've learned throughout my career is that sticking it out, fighting for your worth, but sticking it out for the right reasons really does pay off in the long run. And what I mean by that is I have had managers say to me, we're just not sure you're ready for that level, or we're just not sure that you're ready for that next jump. And specifically when I was in a different industry, I was in a sales role, but I was so intrigued at what they were doing over in marketing. I wanted a taste of that. And I was just being told, no, you're not a marketer, you're a salesperson, and we just don't think you're ready for that. And I said to the hiring manager after my second rejection, what's it going to take? What do I need to do to prove to you that I have the skill set and that I'm so eager to learn that? And they actually gave me a project to work on. It was my project that I had to do in addition to my sales responsibilities. And when I actually did complete that project, and it's not even like the project was a total success either. There were lots of issues with the product and the placement and what was going on. But when I completed that project, I earned that job and I actually did get the offer. So,
Nice.
but yeah, I mean, sometimes getting that feedback just feels like such a punch to the gut. Like, wow, I think I've got it. They don't think I have it. What am I going to do? And it does take the courage to go and ask for, hey, what am I missing, or what could I do to get better in your eyes? And it was such a lesson in the right people who really do want to work with you will give you that chance to prove yourself. Now, on the flip side of that, the wrong people who really are just like giving you that harsh feedback and not giving you any more tools to develop and grow, maybe then you do seek another opportunity. That's not always the wrong choice. I've seen both happen, definitely. But it is interesting. Getting harsh feedback when you're already feeling kind of down, or when you're putting yourself out on a limb, that's that mental toughness. That's when that kicks in to say, like, what do you do next?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that when I was sitting down with my Sandler coach and he was giving me that feedback, I had just like 6 months prior gotten fired from a sales job.
Oh,
So it's, because I was mediocre, I wasn't good enough to kind of make it to the next level, and they needed somebody who was at the next level already. And so they let me go. And it wasn't a bad move. I mean, to some extent, I get a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, which is one of my main forms of motivation in life. And so that helps me actually to get a little chip on my shoulder. But it was in hindsight absolutely the right move for that business and for me. Just was in over my head. But getting fired and then having a Sandler coach go, you just don't believe you're worth it. Like it's not a matter of like, do you have the talent, you have the work ethic, you have the skills. Like, your belief system is the issue. That's tough. That's tough.
yeah. What I like about your example is you reached out to a coach. And I think that that's something that, real leaders and really successful people do often when they're going through that downtime. If you know that you're going to suffer through a problem, lean on some help and find somebody else that can, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's just a good friend that you can talk to, but not like just vent to and just spew all the bad and then walk away and say, well, so it goes, and move on. Like somebody that can really actually give you some actionable feedback. I think that's great advice for anyone who's maybe building mental toughness or figuring out where what they're going to do next. How am I going to overcome the challenge in front of me?
Yeah, in Sandler world, when we think about this, we talk about our success triangle a lot, where you've got behavior and technique at the bottom of the triangle, and then you've got attitude at the top of the triangle, which is your belief system, your belief in yourself, your belief in the marketplace, your belief in the company that you work for. But if you're having a belief system issue, right? Either you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe in the company, you don't believe. What's the cure for that? Well, the cure for that is in the behavior corner, that like do something, right? So in the example you gave, your bosses were like, "Hey, you're not ready for this." You're like, "Well, how do I prove it?" They're like, "Here's a project." So you go and do it. Up until that point, it's unknown. Is Mary going to be successful at this or not? It's unknown to you. It's unknown to them. Your belief system was, I'll be successful. Theirs was maybe not. But how do you find it out? We go and do something. And so for me, that was it too, was I could continue to go through life going from job to job to job and making about 75,000 a year. But if I want a different result, I've got to do something different. And so what are you going to do? And in my case, that was go get a coach, a Sandler coach, right? To learn sales. I had to do that one other time in life too. I became a Sandler client in 2008. And so from 2008 to 2017, I made more money each successive year, as a process of just getting better and working on behaviors and trying to move forward. And then in 2018, my income tanked, and it had nothing to do with external. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't the company I worked for. I just was about to get separated and about to go through a divorce. And so my performance tanked. And what was interesting about that process was, I was actually the one kind of initiating the divorce, but still it weighs on you, right? Like it's an emotional challenge. It's one of the top 3 or 4 worst things in life, according to psychologists. And so I went and hired a sports psychologist whose clients are all pro golfers and football players. And, and so he doesn't coach golfers on how to golf better. He doesn't coach football players on football. He is just strictly mental toughness. And what was interesting about meeting with him was, I sat down, I'm like, man, you got to treat me like an athlete. You got to get me back in the game. Like I suck. And it's not that I suck from a knowledge standpoint. I know how to prospect. I know how to close. I know how to overcome a price objection. I know all that. I've known all that for 10 years. That's why my success has been in the past. Each year has been going up. Excuse me. It just was, all of this other stuff rattling around in your head. You feel like a failure at some aspect in life. And now you carry that into your work life. And if you start to fail at work, your negative self-talk kicks in and they're like, yeah, you suck, Stephen. And so how do you combat that? It was interesting to hear him say the same thing, which is, well, we're going to do something different. And start to put behaviors and processes into place. And so like when you wake up in the morning, what are you going to do? That was kind of his success process to get me back on track. And it worked. It was great, but took a while, took 6, 9 months, 12 months, maybe, to get really fully back to where I was just firing on all cylinders. But that's the process. You got to do something.
Was that 6 to 12 months that you were figuring out that new process? Was that hard for you to do it? It was lengthy, but like, did you wake up some days and just were like, I'm challenged by this?
Oh yeah, I don't think that this is the right thing for everybody, but what he made me do was kind of list all the things I needed to get done in a day, all the things I wanted to get done in a day, track what I was doing each day at work, and then start to fit all those things in. All right, are you going to fit it all in? If you can't fit it all in, what are you going to cut? Let's just go ahead and cut it. Let's not try to fit in more than you can actually get done, and so on. Really, honestly, the biggest change was, I would have told you back then, I'm not a morning person. So I would sleep in till the absolute last minute. I'd wake up at 7:15, take a shower, drink some coffee, get out the door by 7:30 to get to work at 8. That was kind of my routine.
That sounds like high school, Mary. Out the door to the last second.
Last second, absolutely. And he had me write out a schedule down to the minute for my morning routine for the first several hours. And I can tell you, I mean, I have it memorized at this point. I don't quite do it anymore, but I'm close. But I had to wake up at 5:20 a.m. I had to get dressed for the gym, pack my work clothes, eat a banana, make my coffee, get in the car by 5:50 a.m., get to the gym by 6:05, start working out by 6:15, finish the workout at 7:15. You take a shower at the gym, leave the gym at 7:30, get to work at 8. So like the getting work to work at 8 thing was the same every time, but my morning routine completely different before that. And then the first few hours at work, same thing. What I used to do was walk in the door, go around, talk to everybody, see what's going on, kind of start putting out, people would bring me problems. I start putting out fires. And so what he had me do is basically close my door till 9 a.m. and go, what do I need to get done between 8 and 9 to set up the rest of the day for success? And a lot of times that meant doing the hard things first, whatever that was. So if somebody's pissed at me, I got to pick up the phone and call. If there's an email I got to respond to, I'm going to do that right away. But I'm getting those hard things out of the way from 8 to 9. And we just kind of called it 9 before 9. What are the 9 hardest things you got to get done? 9 phone calls, 9 emails, 9 whatever. Get those done first. And then at 9 a.m., open your door, let everybody else bring you their problems, that kind of stuff. So I am now a morning person. I mean, through the pandemic and everything else, I can't sleep in past like 6 a.m. anymore. And previous old Stephen for 43 years would have said, oh, I'm definitely not a morning person. I'm just not. And now I am, apparently. So
Yeah, so I love this concept because I heard this through another podcast that was talking about this in the realm of health and fitness goals. But the basics of it were, what if you approached every challenge like it was Mount Everest? Climbing Mount Everest is no easy feat. It's going to take planning. It's going to take work. You might need some people to help you along the way, some guides. You're going to hit a base camp every once in a while where you're going to get a little reprieve, but then next day you're back up on climbing that goal, and it's going to be really hard. So you kind of know when you're setting that goal or when you're going to go through that transformation, this is going to be tough. This is going to be really challenging on my system, and I'm going to have to embrace it. But what if I embraced every goal that I set as hard as I embrace climbing Mount Everest? What if I actually prepared as much as I needed to and enlisted the help that I need to and really took all of those little steps that it takes to make that summit worth it? What if I did that? What could that result be? And again, this podcast was going down a real health and fitness line of that, but I think that you could totally bring this into business too. Like, what if you really took the look in the mirror and said, if I really cleaned up my schedule, if I did some good personal decisions for me, and then I really tackled what was on my plate and my objectives with my company, what could it look like? Like, what if I treated it as if it were Mount Everest? And I don't know. It was something that I heard that really jazzed me up as like I want to do that. I want to have the intensity and the ferocity to meet the challenge as if it were an Everest. And it's going to be hard. It's nothing about climbing Mount Everest is easy.
yeah.
But it's going to be a challenge. But I think that's back to the resiliency piece. That's what makes it all worth it. And that's how people see it to the top. They really put in the work, even when it's not feeling easy, and they see those results.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's 2 other wrinkles that I think are interesting to talk about. One is, how you, and I'll contrast one of my coworkers here with me, Jared Price. How do you deal with tough times? And not that he deals with it well and I don't, or vice versa, but I think we have very different ways of approaching it. Let me give you an example. If, let's say we both had the same, quota for the month, and halfway through the month, we're having a great month. We've met our quota. Well, Jared would go, man, I'm halfway through the month. I've met my quota. I get the next 2 weeks off. I'm going to go have a great time. And he's just going to enjoy life, get back, relax, and go, I earned this. This is awesome. Right. How am I going to approach that? Well, I'm a little bit like a gambler. And if I'm winning, I'm going to keep gambling. So if I'm 2 weeks into the month and I'm having a great month, I'm like, oh my gosh, let's get going. Let's see if I can't just blow this thing out of the water. Right. So to some extent, like if I'm going well, that motivates me to keep going, and I'm going to go get it. Jared's like, I did great. I'm going to take a little break. Right. Now, the flip side of that is, let's say we're 2 weeks into the month and we're not having a good month. Like we're having a bad month. Our numbers are down. We're behind. Jared gets mad. He's like, screw this. I'm going to hit my numbers this month. And so he's going to buckle down and he's going to work twice as hard. He's going to do whatever it's got to take to hit his numbers that month. Me, on the other hand, I get 2 weeks into the month and I'm not going to hit my numbers. I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I'll see you next month. I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off because I'm not going to hit it anyway. Right. And so it's not that it's, is it positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? Like, how are you wired? Part of it is just recognizing we're wired differently. There's no good or bad there. It is just, how are you wired? And then understanding how you're wired. So obviously there's lots of months where I can't just go, you know what, this is a terrible month, I'm out of here. But I got to understand that's my natural inclination. And so maybe I do need to, hang it up at noon one day and go for a walk, or, take a break and just, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go, all right, let me buckle down. Because once I get mad, then I'm very unproductive. So I got to calm down. When Jared gets mad, he's very productive. So it's like, I think that's part of it too, is how are you wired? And then how do you harness how you're wired? Not that being wired one way or the other is better or worse. It's just, how do you harness that? How are you wired, Mary?
Well, I do think the key though between you and Jared is that no matter what, someone's working.
Yeah, that's why we've worked together now for a few different jobs. Yeah, so it works out well.
I think that's pretty great. How am I wired? Oh man, I do tend to like the pressure, so I could be like a mix of both of you, in the sense that when I know numbers are low, that's when I'm like, all right, heat is on, we gotta perform. And when times are good, I can be a little bit more like, all right, this is feeling good. But what I like about when times are good is that gives me the time to do the actual kind of strategy work that I want to work on and get a bigger picture. So I like when times are good because I actually feel like I do better work in those times versus the firefighting that's required when times are bad. And I think maybe I could coach myself for a moment. You almost have to reverse that. And when times are bad, we still have to deploy the strategy. You can't just go into operator mode just because times are bad. And I think that I can definitely be the kind of salesperson that falls on the panic, what are we going to do button. And maybe that's some of my personal branding. I definitely love to be authentic and clear with my customers, and being genuine is a huge part of my personal brand. So I want to be as transparent as possible, but you can't always be, right? You got to look at the bigger picture and just say, hey, this is bad today, but I'm going to be here for a long run. So it's very reflective look inward to kind of understand how I'm wired, but I do like the pressure, I will say. Like I don't mind having to kind of turn it on when times are getting tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's usually when some of my best ideas come up, like again, like being told we don't think you're ready for a position. That's when I was like, okay, well, what would make me ready? That was not a reason for me all of a sudden to not still pursue what I thought I wanted to do. And I'm glad I did it, and you know what, in the long run, I actually came back to sales. I decided that was a really fun exercise, and I learned a lot about that channel and what's important to marketing and how they assess different activities. But ultimately, my peers at the time were like, really, you're going back to sales? Like, I thought that's what you wanted. I was like, yeah, I thought it's what I wanted too. But I actually really like this seat better. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll throw one little other wrinkle in there. I think, looking at my family tree, one of the things that pops out is that we probably have a gene or something that leans towards depression a little bit. Like I have a grandfather that I never met. He died of cirrhosis of the liver before I was born because he was an alcoholic. And, in talking to my aunts, uncles, mom, and whatnot, it sounds like he was just really depressed, right? But the way his coping mechanism back then was alcohol, because we didn't have a lot of good drugs for that, or good therapy for that. And so, for me, one of the things I've found is that exercise piece is really important because I either need Prozac or I need to go to the gym. If I go to the gym, I'm probably good. If I don't go to the gym, I'm not good. So like those two things I think I've learned about myself, as I got to do, if I start slacking off in the physical fitness side, it's going to affect my mental health. So I know that everybody's a little different there too. But that's a component that I think is worth talking about. We don't talk about that a lot in this world. It's something we don't really like to admit.
I so agree. And I was never really a big fitness person in high school. I did a very niche sport of Irish step dancing. So that was my competitive name to fame and loved it. It was great. Honestly, I wish I did it now because I'm way stronger now. But it was, not a typical gym environment. We didn't, really ever go to a weight room or anything like that. So my first kind of exposure to that was actually in college when pretty much everyone would just like go to the gym. And I literally would look around like, what do you do in this facility? Like, no idea. And, slowly over time, I did other things other than just the elliptical. But it took a long time. And then when I graduated college, I found CrossFit. And I mean, it was like a drug that I couldn't get enough of. I just became so addicted to moving my body in that way. And I still do some of the functional fitness movements and have mixed that in with some different kind of weight training. But without a doubt, like I can't find anything that matches that dopamine response that you get when you go move your body for an hour. And it is just so important to find whatever that is for you. Maybe it's working on your car or pursuing your hobby, but give yourself that time to be yourself and move around. And I just think that everyone, maybe it's cooking, it doesn't have to necessarily be physical fitness, but I think it's a huge way to just recalibrate like why you're doing what you do. Because otherwise, what is this grind like all about? There
Yeah.
is more to it.
So can I put you on the spot for a minute?
Sure.
Let me give you a scenario. All right. So let's say you're my boss, you're sales manager. I'm a sales guy, work for you. And I've told you a lot about me, right? Like probably a little bit of family history, depression. I got to be at the gym or I get cranky. I'm a streaky sales guy. When I'm on a roll, I'm on a roll. But when I'm going bad, I need like an intervention to get out of my funk, right? And so let's say, here we are, end of Q2, going into Q3, and let's say year to date, I'm just getting my butt kicked. Now, hypothetically, in this scenario, I'm a decent sales guy. Like hit my numbers last year, hit my numbers the year before. Like I've been doing well, but here we are, 2025. I'm getting my butt kicked. You're my boss. What would you tell me to do? How would you manage me? What would be your strategies to kind of get me on track?
Ooh, great people management question. I think knowing what I know about you, and because now we have this relationship going, the first thing I have to do is just a personal check-in. Hey, Stephen, how you doing? And really hear in your own words what's going on. Do you go to personal as, hey, this is why I'm not doing as well as I'm doing? And if you do, then we got to give you some space to figure that out a little bit. Maybe me putting the heat on you from a work perspective is only going to make you spiral down further into that depression, right? So we're not going to do that. But if your feedback is, hey, my customers just aren't buying and it's tough out here and it's rough out here and I don't really know how to make them buy. Well, then we got to zoom out and look at some of the objectives that we set in the beginning of the year and do some check-ins on that and do some habit stacking. Well, we don't only sell equipment here. We're business consultants. So what are you doing to enable your customers to make better business decisions? And look into some of the other ancillary benefits that you get with just being a partner with our company. And that, in my opinion, is one of the areas where you can really find a lot of holes in people's game. Are you doing the other things that it takes to be a successful account manager that aren't just taking an order? And it's hard. That is hard work. Those are not easy conversations to have when people want to just, scream at you about the fact that you don't have the parts to satisfy their grumpy homeowner that day. But you got to put those reps in to build that credibility with your customers long term. And I believe me, I understand that a ton, even though I maybe do it from the distributor level where it's a level removed from a dealer customer. We have good days, we have bad days, but at the end of the day, there's a strategy that we've mutually agreed on at the beginning of the year. We got to hold ourselves to those points. So, hey, how's it going? Personal is going over here. Honestly, my style has always been to just give people some grace in that department and offer a helping hand if I can, or if I can't, let people breathe a little bit. I actually went through this exercise with a sales leader who I was working with, and just wasn't getting it. Just we weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of issues. Communication was dwindling from his side to my side, and it really took some digging to say like, hey, just talk to me. What's going on? Found out he had a lot going on in the home life, a lot of transitions going on, a lot of events. And, ultimately I said, look, I want you to figure that out, but I need you in this seat. You are the captain of this team, and you can't be as absent as you've been for as long as you've been. So what do you need to do in your personal seat to get right in your professional seat? And just sort of saying that, I mean, it took about a week or two. I'd say maybe 2 weeks before we saw change happen in the professional. But just kind of saying that was enough to really turn the tide. And so excited. This person has now, done an amazing job of hiring more people to stack out the bench. Some of that exercise was realizing that he just had way too much on his plate and he was doing way too much. And then also, really doing that inward reflection and saying, Mary, you're right. I wasn't being my best. I just needed to go address a few things, but I want to be the guy and I am the guy. And I was like, all right, let's go. Like, let's do that. So I think those would be my two big things. Check in on the personal, give people room to be who they are, give them a chance to course correct. I think that's maybe something we don't always do, right? It's like, oh, you're so bad at your job and now you're fired. It's like, give people a chance to hear that feedback. But then also go back to those goals that you mutually agreed on. Everybody should be working towards those annual goal setting conversations, and what is it? And in sales, if your goal was a number and you're not hitting that number, you got to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing, one of my other lessons learned, and this is kind of a little heavy, maybe. So fair warning to listeners, but owning a business, you just never know what your employees' issues are and how that's going to impact the workplace and so on. And so, some of the toughest days I had as a business owner, we had a day where one of our installers didn't show up for work that day. And, he had gotten hit head on the way to work and died.
Oh.
And so the grief, I mean, great guy, like 25, 26 years old, like big smile, hard worker, the kind of guy that just everybody wanted to work with, work around. And then he's gone. He was engaged, supposed to get married. And so, the bouncing back, you're in a leadership role, you own the company. Like, there's not a class on that in college, right? There's not that's not on the fall training schedule that the distributor's handing you. I mean, but it's, what do you do? And so I think sometimes in a moment of crisis, you might need help, like, and just go, okay, I've never been through a crisis like this. What do we need to do? We had another scenario a few years later where one of our service techs didn't come to work and had killed himself the night before because his wife said she was leaving. And so again, like the ripple effect, I mean, you've got the guys that he's closest with. Obviously, you've got guys that maybe know him pretty well, but they didn't hang out together outside of work. You've got people that barely knew him, but like, there's a ripple effect across the whole organization when something like that happens. And it's, all right, what do you do? How do you handle a crisis? So I think part of the mental toughness piece is understanding your own personal crisis. Like, how do you manage that? And then part of that is just institutionally, or when you're in a leadership role, how do you handle that? And so those are experiences nobody wants to have. But if you live long enough and you're in this business, in this industry, like, you're going to run into things like this. And so, thinking through having a game plan, thinking through ahead of time, what do we do? I was very fortunate. My dad's a pastor. And so, having some good advice from the outside, we brought in some therapists. We had a big company meeting. We talked about things, but it was really interesting to see, like, out of 70 employees, bring in a therapist for a few days and have them just at the office and have people schedule time to sit down with the therapist and talk. Probably a third of the employees took them up on that, right? And that was eye opening for me too, to go, man, I don't think that third was signing up to talk to the therapist just because of the event. That third is signing up to talk to the therapist because of things going on in their own life. And they're realizing, wow, I really do need maybe some professional help before this gets bad. And so I think it's a gray area when you're a manager or the company, you own the company, or you work for a big corporation. But I think being sensitive to those things, one of the more unorthodox things that I did in my career was working for a company where I was the sales manager. So I wasn't the owner, but I did have a marketing budget. And I told my sales guys, if they would go get a therapist, I would reimburse them for their therapy costs out of my marketing budget. And honestly, I think it was probably the best bang for the buck on those marketing dollars, because their numbers went up. If getting a therapist, dealing with their problems, tackling it head on, allows them to come to work and show up a little bit better, pay dividends. So I think it's just mental toughness. You never know when you're going to need it. You don't know whether it's going to be kind of self-inflicted in the case of maybe my divorce, or just external factors that aren't my fault at all, but still affect me. Tough world out there sometimes.
Yeah, that you don't get that mental toughness, shell without maybe going through some of that vulnerability, right? It's going to be reflective to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, and then bring that forward in, a more actionable, positive way. Those are some pretty incredible stories. And I think one thing that really comes through for me with, the leadership side of that is how important it is as leaders for us to take those events seriously. And, you lead with grace, right? And you lead with the opportunity for people to feel some of those feelings and give people a place to do it. You don't have to necessarily hold public forum and everyone say their feelings out loud. That could be really uncomfortable, but giving people a place to go and address it. And it also then creates a moment in time where we have addressed it and now we can all move forward together as a group. And I love that. I think that that's a great leadership quality, to be able to handle change in a fashion that doesn't say, this is the change and we're moving on. Like, this is the change. We got some feelings about the change, giving people the opportunity to feel those feelings, but then also, step forward together in a positive way. So that's a really amazing testament to, the kind of group that you were with and the kind of culture they promoted. And I hope somebody takes away a little bit of that advice from this today.
Yeah, I think, a lot of my ideas I've just stolen from other people. So if somebody steals an idea from this podcast, they're welcome to it, because it's not a lot of original thought here. It's just kind of a compilation of things. One last question for you, Barry. All right. So you gave me kind of a rundown of how you might manage me as an individual if I was struggling. But what about, kind of the football coach mentality where your team they lose the big game? Right? You got talented players. You had a great game plan coming into it. Everybody was working hard. And for whatever reason, the calls didn't go your way. The ball didn't bounce your way. You lost the big game. What kind of pep talk do you give your team about mental resiliency? And again, it could be, sales team, right? That, you're the company that you work for, or the people that you manage. Like, what does that look like?
All right. This is where I get exposed as a New England Patriots fan who grew up on the school of thought of Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
And he's very famous for that one press conference where they were on Indianapolis, right? They were on Indianapolis, and that was that. Yeah. We're not going to look backward at that game. We're not going to talk about that game. Now, we all know Bill Belichick's approach was to not discuss that publicly, and he handled all of those decisions and conversations behind closed doors. And I was once asked to come up with an example of a really good leader that was a really bad communicator. And my answer for that was actually Bill Belichick, because from what we saw, that was definitely the truth. My response to the question, though, is, how do you really come back from the big loss? And personally, for me, I know I've kind of said it in some different ways, but you take up a little bit of space to say, yeah, that was a loss. Maybe for me personally, I got to feel those feelings. Like that was a bummer. I'm upset about it. I wish this had gone better. I really thought I executed on that. So again, just really personally here, like I got to feel that pain a little bit. I got to just sort of not wallow, but give myself the opportunity to just sort of say, "Gosh, I'm really disappointed," and then it really is a reflection on what did go well, or what did I glean from a part of the transaction that I could have done better. Sometimes sitting across the room from other negotiations and maybe it didn't go my way, I really look back and think, well, could I have said that different? Did I deliver the message clearly enough? Did I get my point across? Or did we just have a total miss in ideals? And it didn't matter if I said that the product was free, like we weren't going to get there. You gotta kind of look through some of those things so that you know tactically how you would address them in the future. But that's really it, little bit of sadness, realizing that when this happens, this is how I feel, so I can identify that. And then the next time, sharpen those edges where maybe I could have been a little bit stronger, a little bit better. Sometimes the client's just not going to go with you, and that is okay. Maybe they have fundamentally made up their mind going in. Those ones take a little bit less time for me to get over because usually you know what's going on in that situation. But sometimes when it is the big game and you just really feel like this is mine for the taking and then it isn't, it's just being honest with yourself, doing that self-reflective work and saying, yeah, next time we talk about financials, I want to be really dialed in to these pieces. Or, you know, I was a little too cutesy in my preamble, right? Next time where I'm in front of a client of that size, I'm going to be really dialed in on my language. I can definitely go humor really fast. And getting that professional tone and speak is something that I've worked really hard on.
Yeah. We have a couple Sandler rules that I think apply. One is either you win or you learn. I mean,
Ooh,
that's kind of the mindset. And so I think, part of it is what you said Bill Belichick does behind closed doors, which is go, okay, we got to learn something. I mean, what we lost for a reason. So, but we don't have to wallow in it. On to the next game, right? And I think the Sandler version of that is some will, some won't. So what? Who's next? And I've got
mm,
a friend that wrote a book with that title. But that's, I think like I'm probably overusing sports analogies at this point, but you're a quarterback, you throw a pick six, so the other team intercepts the ball, runs it back for a touchdown. What happens next? Well, they kick off, you've got the ball again. And so
right.
if you're spending a lot of time wallowing in, oh my gosh, I just threw a pick six, it's the worst thing ever, like your next possession is useless. You're useless at that point. So you've got to have that mental toughness to go, hey, it happened,
Hmm.
on to the next drive, right?
Yeah.
We got to come back and put a drive together and go score some points on our own. So, that some will, some won't. So what? Who's next? When I lose one, I hear that in my head because I had a coach pound that into me for a while. So, failure is universal. It's going to happen. Learning not to allow that to affect your view of yourself and just go, all right, everybody fails. Here's a failure on my part. What am I going to learn? On to the next one.
Yeah.
That's been key.
One tool that really works for me in this department is self affirmations. And I know affirmations can get kind of into a department where people feel like that's a little silly, and I don't know if that's for me, and I'm not going to do that. But I like to listen to them. I start my day with one, and there's a playlist that I found that has different kinds of affirmations, and each track is about a minute long. But depending on what I'm needing that day, I plug into that, and I say them back out loud to the track that's talking to me through the speaker, and it helps. It just helps get my mind right to hear it out loud and hear that reminder, and then I'm able to go accomplish what I need to do. But I didn't know that that's actually kind of a new thing for me and within the last year. But there
Nice.
were so many projects on my plate, and some were going well and some were going wrong and some we were winning, but the burden of the work was just kind of starting to feel like a wave every single day, and I really needed something to just pull me out of that storm and just remind myself like I'm here for a reason, and that was what it was for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit longer episode today than some of our other ones, but a tough topic and like one
Yeah.
that we just both felt was pretty relevant, regardless of the season, the time of the year, your role in this industry. Maybe you are a service tech, maybe you own a company, maybe you're a territory manager. I mean, who knows? But failure is universal. It is going to hit all of us at some point. And so just the ability to bounce back and keep rolling, not let it impact your view of yourself. Well, I thought it was a pretty relevant topic for us today.
Yeah, hopefully you won't have to be too mentally tough to listen to our episodes going forward in the future.
Sounds good.
Well, with that, I'm Mary,
I'm Steven.
and we will be back at you next time talking about more HVAC full blast topics.
Woohoo. Bye.